It's a big one today because I want to talk about these three fears that I see are at the heart of all misalignment in ourselves. I've not yet come across a situation that didn't reduce down to one of these three. And it reminds me of the quote that I've shared in a video previously about the thing that the Sid Banks quote. If the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. And so this is a perfect example of becoming unafraid of our experience. Because with all of these that I'm going to share with you today, as far as I can see it, it's not actually the experience that we're afraid of. It's how it feels inside of us. It's how it feels in our inner experience that we're afraid of. So in that quote, although it can be useful to start with seeing it looks like I'm afraid of the outside world, the more I've excavated, the more I've seen that no, actually, the only thing I was ever afraid of was my own inner experience, and that got projected onto the world. And so the less unafraid I've become of my own feelings and the experience of it in my body, then the easier things have become, the more aligned my experience has become. So these three fears, the three fears that are driving everything that you're doing or not doing, the three fears, the experiences that you're afraid of, which you think you can't handle, and therefore which you're doing everything possible to avoid having. Guilt, shame, and disappointment. Now, sometimes these are very close to the surface, and it's really obvious that that's what we're not wanting. Sometimes it's really obvious that that's what looks abhorrent and unbearable. But sometimes they can be a bit hidden behind other things. And so I had a little think about experiences of mine, experiences of clients that I see often, that very simply and quickly take us back to those three of guilt, shame, and disappointment. So, for example, if you have the experience in a relationship with somebody where you don't speak up, then that's an example of being afraid of the experience of rejection, which is an example of being afraid of the experience of being shameful. Because if I'm rejected, is that we often believe that means there's something wrong with me, which means I'm awful, I'm wrong in some way, I am shameful. And so we avoid that experience of shame by avoiding being rejected, which means avoiding saying what we really think, because we don't want that experience of shame. Whereas in fact, when we can come to see that, first of all, that's the behavior, I'm not speaking up to this person, I'm not telling them what I really think, I'm not being 100% honest with them, then we can find our way back to the fact that we're afraid of being rejected. And we can start to make friends with the experience of rejection in our system. And as we do that, then we can find our way back to the experience of shame. And we can start to make friends with our experience of shame in our system. And as we do that and include these experiences we've run away from for so long of rejection and shame, the more we can do that, the less we avoid speaking up, the more we speak up. Because we're now no longer fearing these experiences. I'm now no longer afraid of my inner experience. And that changes the world. Because now I'll speak up and I'll say what I think from a place of authenticity, from a place of alignment, from a place of honesty, knowing that in fact in the next moment the way the conversation goes could mean I change my mind again. But in that moment, that is my authentic expression. So that's the first one with rejection and shame. The second one might be kind of obvious, but I don't know. And this is the one where we avoid going for something doing something different, stepping outside what we've normally done, going for a new opportunity, because we're afraid of being a failure. Because if we're a failure, that might mean we're a disappointment. And we're afraid of being a disappointment. So same as before, the surface experience is not going for stuff, holding ourselves back, playing small, keeping our world small. Because if I go for something and don't achieve it, I'll be a failure. And if I'm a failure, then I'll be a disappointment. And so again, we trace our way back. We see the surface experience of a small life, at the very least, a life that we feel something inside of us knows there's more of us than this. There's more to us than this. There's more that we're capable of than this. And so we find our way back to the fact we're avoiding the experience of failure. I don't want to give it a go and not succeed, so I'll just not go, in the avoidance of failure. And we avoid the failure because we don't want the feeling of being a disappointment. And so as we become unafraid of being a failure, of course, failure is entirely subjective, but we avoid when we make friends with the experience of failing and see, in fact, it's an experience of lessons and learning and growth. When we make friends with the experience of disappointment, of being a disappointment, of others being disappointed, all of that, then the chain is broken. And again, our natural aligned expression can more easily come through, because we're now not afraid of failure or disappointment. All that's left is that freedom of expression that we are. And then the third one that I see a lot is putting others first, helping others before we help ourselves, taking care of others before we take care of ourselves, putting others' needs first before our own needs, helping, helping, helping. In a world where helping gets revered and applauded, people get awards and, who knows, even king's honours for such stuff. But in the meantime, on the inside, they could be entirely depleted. They could be working all hours. They could be giving and giving and giving from an entirely empty cup, because they're doing it from a space of, I need to help, in order to avoid feeling guilt. Because we've been taught that if we don't help, that's wrong, that helping is kind, that helping is good. And if you don't do that, then you're a bad girl or boy. You're selfish. You're putting yourself above others. We've all been taught that's wrong. And so we feel guilty that I'm not doing something for another person. I didn't find an in-between one with this. I wonder if you can see one. But as far as I see, it's a pretty direct connection between, if I don't help the other, then I'll feel guilty. And so again, we see the outward behavior, helping, 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 giving from an empty cup, depleted. There is nothing wrong with helping, but when we're doing it from the avoidance of guilt, it depletes us. We end up in burnout. We end up in physical difficulties. At the very least, we're exhausted. And we're not fully enjoying our life, because our primary attention is on the other. So we see that outward behavior and we find our way back to the guilt that we think we can't handle, the guilt that we think is unbearable to feel in our system. And therefore, to avoid that, we keep helping, keep helping, keep helping. So make friends with the guilt, come into an experience of realizing that you can handle guilt. you are perfectly capable of holding the experience that gets called guilt. And again, the connection is severed, and helping happens at the appropriate time. But knowing truly that I can only keep helping if I first help myself, if I first take care of myself. And so the endless giving and giving and giving can settle into a natural and healthy rhythm. So I wonder what those sound like to you. I wonder if they resonate. I would love to know if there's something in your life that you think doesn't equate down to guilt, shame, or disappointment. So we can see if there's in fact only 3 or not. But either way, whatever that number is, what fundamentally matters, what you're fundamentally looking for, is an absence of fear of your experience, of your inner experience. It's not really an absence of fear of the outer. That's a great place to start. But what you're really after is an absence of fear of your inner experience, an absence of fear of all emotional and feeling and physical sensations. Because it's only that which keeps driving you into repetitive, unhealthy, misaligned behaviors. And making friends with all of our inner experience, including all of our inner experience, is so enlightening, is so aligning, then leads to the feeling of the wholeness that we naturally are. So if you want this, come to the Enlightenment Event. It's called the Enlightenment Event, but it is actually a 9-month program, all about revealing your aligned expression, all about making friends with all of your experience, so that you no longer have to run away from any of it into the safety, the apparent safety of action and behavior. It's the place where you can truly, truly come into a close relationship with everything that you're experiencing, so that you feel enlightened, so that your natural, unique expression is revealed and life gets more fun and fulfilling. If you want to join, the link's below. I'd love to meet you there, and reach out with any questions you've got. Lots of love. Take care.